Okay, I decided that I would like to try to share some of my garden in a different form than just pictures. So this time I'm going to try to record a video. This is my first one doing it this way, so excuse me. This is a fig tree that we've been growing for, what, 3 years, Princess? Something like that.
Yes.
Every time it works good every year except in the winters here in Pittsburgh. It wants to try to die off. So we just let it go and it comes back each year. This year I decided to add some straw mulch around it along with the rock border to help keep the weeds away from the fig tree. Now, continuing around the garden, we get to the first of my 21 boxes that I have here in the backyard. This is a box currently devoted to trying to clone grapevines. This is a version of white Niagara that my better half brought back from New York. And even though they're stored, they're being grown in these cages, it seems the grapevines really don't need the assistance of the cages. The cages were all built from supplies that I picked up from Growers Supply and put together myself. They
Your
lift
own your
off.
own design.
They lift off and
Hmm.
they're easy enough to work with, and they keep the more aggressive critters at bay. Now this box here is the next one up. It's currently being used to grow some lettuce. This variety of lettuce is my favorite. It's called Nevada. It works pretty good during the hot weather, and if I grow it in batches, I can get continual harvest. This frame that you're looking at was an older design. This is where I just tried to put the wire fabric over top of a wooden frame, and it didn't quite work out as good as I expected. The staples pulled out, so I ended up having to tie wrap the wire fabric in place. But again, the wire fabric does keep out the problems. This next box is where I'm trying to attempt to clone and grow trees. It's similar to the previous box, and it's got a wooden frame with the wire fabric over top of it, but it's a lower body. I didn't think that some of my crops would get very tall, so I made shorter ones. This was originally intended to do lettuce. And I've used the straw mulch in this box as well, and you have to look pretty hard, but there's some trees. Are there still any? Oh, well, all right. Excuse me while I run over here. There's at least one pear tree that looks like it's going to give it a go. And then I also have some chestnut trees that a neighbor of mine pulled up and let me try to grow them, seeing that chestnuts are a favorite ingredient of a type of dressing that my better half makes. In this next box, what we've got is German butterball potatoes. The potatoes were actually left in the ground from last year, so they can just grow first thing in the spring. And they came up fast and they were growing good. But if you look closely, there is no covering over this framework. It had previously been covered with deer netting because initially I thought my major challenge with pests were going to be the local deer. But it turns out that they were only part of the challenge. I also have groundhogs and rabbits. And the groundhogs and rabbits just chew through the deer netting. In fact, I witnessed one escaping into one of these boxes by chewing its way in just to try to get away from me one day. Now, to contrast, I should step to the side because I'm casting shadows. This is another one of the new improved all metal frames, cages, that works really good. And if you look here, this is the same type of potato. It's a German butterball, as I showed you in the previous box. But because it's got superior protection, this is a single potato plant, while the previous potato plant was probably about 25 or 30 potato plants. So the protection's made a big difference in how well these potatoes are doing. I stopped to take this image here to show you the type of flowers that are produced by the Rose of Sharon that I've got growing in my hedge. I've been working to clone and reproduce these, and I hope to produce a nice hedge about my orchard using them, but that's a work in progress. I'll show you more about that later. In the corner here of the hedges, I am attempting to grow an English walnut tree. This is one of two. I'm supposed to have to grow two of them to get good results. And it's being shaded by the hedge. I'm going to have to cut the hedge back a bit to give it more sun. And right at its base, I think it has a world of nutrients available because this is where my compost pile is located. And you can say, sure, Ben, I haven't seen a compost pile in that bad of a state in years. Well, that's about how often I tend to the compost pile, is once every couple of years. Now, in the other corner of the yard, I have the companion walnut tree that I'm growing. And because it's not sheltered by the hedges, it's doing much better, but it has some very odd growth structures, and I'm going to end up pruning off of it this year. But hopefully between the two, I'll have plenty of nuts because I do like English walnuts. Moving down the other side of my garage, this is an image showing you the one blackberry bush that is doing well, and beside it is one that I had to give up on this year. It may be because it's growing too close to a mulberry bush, which is just around the corner, and rather aggressive. I'm going to have to try to clone the good blackberry bush to replace this one, or that mulberry bush is going to have to come out. Produces a lot of fruit, but it's very short-lived and it's not exactly spectacular. Recently, I managed to finish up and clean up my raspberry patch. This is an assortment of raspberries that have been growing here probably for about 2 or 3 years at this point, and keeping weeds under control has been a challenge. So this year we're trying the shredded straw mulch. And so far it's looking pretty good. There was one spot where the oldest raspberry decided it was going to stop living. Either that or else I dug up too many of its clones and killed it. But here I'm trying an layering experiment to see if I can clone the neighboring raspberry to fill the gap that was left missing. As it stands, I always like the way the gardens look shortly after weeding and treatment. Now, if they could only stay that way. Like I said previously, this is the year where I'm learning to use and apply mulch. Hopefully it's going to save me further work.
What's happened recently?
Well, this is a box of red potatoes. It's being protected by the metal cages, and it's doing just fine. In fact, the granddaughters and I may be digging into these boxes tomorrow to make French fries. I want to reinforce and make sure they understand that French fries come from underground. Right next to it is a box where I am attempting to grow Brussels sprouts, which up to a couple of days ago looked pretty good. But because a volunteer tobacco plant was getting too tall for the cage, I decided to swap it out with one of my traditional wooden frame covered with deer netting. And as a result, some creature has been nibbling on my Brussels sprouts and doing a really bad job. You have to trust me, they looked good a couple of days ago. Seeing that most of the damage is at the top, this is another one of those cases where I think it was probably one of the neighborhood deer had gotten at this box. Moving just down the line, this is a box of tomatoes. It's a variety that I don't remember the exact number, but they're called Heinz 4653 or something like that. They're a determinate variety, and because we grow tomatoes for tomato sauce, they are a wonderful plant for what we're doing. And the bonus is that all I have to do is ignore a couple of the fallen fruit, and I never have to plant tomato plants. They just come up on their own. Next to it is a box that is fingerling potatoes. I think the actual variety is Lorata. They're probably getting pretty close to harvesting. I might be digging in this box for the potatoes, French fries that we make tomorrow, because the granddaughters like the smaller French fries anyway. So, a lot of weeds, but at this point, the weeds don't seem to make much difference to the potatoes, because up to this point, they've been dominating the growth in the box anyway. In the next row of boxes down, I am purposely letting my radishes go to seed. And I'm very pleased to have flowers on my radishes. Last year, I waited too long to try to let my radishes go to seed, and they failed to do so, so I didn't get any seed from them at all. In the box just next to it is another variety of potato. This is my personal favorite. It's called Purple Viking. Like the others, it's pretty close to being ready to harvest. And whenever it's in full development, they can be easily identified by a purple tint that you see in the leaf. But at this point, sort of hard to see. But hopefully if you look down at the ground there are a couple of purple Vikings sticking their head out through the ground. So I hope to be collecting some potatoes from here soon. In the next box down, I have a version of russet potato. They may be Kennebecks, I don't remember the exact variety, but they look a lot better than the other ones, but they also came up later than the other potatoes, and they're just a little later on the calendar. Give them a couple weeks, they should look like the other ones and be ready to harvest. Next to it, I have a box where I'm trying to grow broccoli. Broccoli is another one of those crops where I haven't been successful previously. And again, I was challenged because whenever I planted these, I covered them with the old style cages with just the deer netting. And as a result, some critter, groundhog, rabbit, who knows, got in there, nibbled them all off to the point where the wife and I were convinced they were all dead. Well, thankfully, we were wrong, and the broccoli is still giving it a go. I don't see any signs of flowers yet. In the next row down, I have a box of corn that I'm growing, which is probably about 5 or 6 foot tall at this point. I grow something called Country Gentleman. It gives me more than one ear per cane, and it's a heirloom variety. Next to the corn is a box of carrots that I have left go to seed, and I'm really anxiously watching to see if I can find any seed in these flowers. But to this point, I have not found anything that looks like carrot seed to me yet. So I am a bit concerned because there should be a lot more flowers, leaves on these flowers than there are now. But I have personally witnessed suspect number 2, the groundhog, on top of this cage eating all the leaves off the plant. So whether I get seeds from these carrots, we'll find out in the future. I had said that I would mention more about the Rose of Sharon. Over the winter, I took a lot of cuttings and collected seeds from the Rose of Sharon, and I grew these on my front porch and brought them out early this spring. They didn't like the shock of being moved, and they were hit with a little bit of a freeze, but they've managed to come back nicely. Now the next box down is a special indulgent box that I've put in for my better half, which is all Red Bull onions. I wanted her to give her the option of being able to just step outside the back door and collect onions to cook with. One of our favorite meals involves onions, and Red Bull is her favorite. Next to that box, there is another box of corn, which is the second batch. I grow these in a matrix of 5 by 5, giving me somewhere around 30 ears of corn. And by planting them in different batches, I can stretch out the harvest season. I did attempt to grow peanuts in amongst the corn, but peanuts are another one of those plants that the critters just want to chew on the leaves. So they don't look like they're doing well. I'm going to have to figure out a better way of protecting peanuts so that they're not nibbled to death. There's one more critical element of the garden that I'd like to show you, and that is the strawberry patch. The maintenance of the strawberry patch is mainly in the domain of my wife, who's done a pretty good job of keeping this patch well weeded, and it started to fill in nicely. Up until recently, we've been getting a bowl of strawberries a week out of this patch, and at the moment they've sort of taken a break and they've decided to go into let's spread out and live up to our reputation of spreading like weeds. I can only see one flower presently. There's some others, but they're harder to see. So they'll be producing again later. This variety is called Seascape, and it's an ever-bearing variety, and I've been really happy with it. But it is all covered with deer netting because the deer are very happy with this patch as well. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Thank you. Bye.